shape-shifting witch spreading garbage everywhere, to a green-skinned zombie grunting your name in the darkness, to a mad scientist turning people into animals. These were cartoon villains disguised as children's entertainment that haunted an entire generation's dreams. Lotta Litter. Let's journey back to November 17, 1973, a time when environmental awareness was reaching fever pitch following the first Earth Day in 1970. It was on this very date that children across America encountered something genuinely unsettling during their Saturday morning cartoon ritual. Lotta Litter, a shape-shifting villainess who would become the embodiment of ecological nightmares. Voiced by the distinctive Rosemarie, Lotta Litter appeared in Yogi's gang with a mission that went far beyond typical cartoon villainy. She wasn't trying to steal jewels or conquer the world. No, her goal was far more insidious. She wanted to trick Yogi Bear and his friends into transforming the pristine Jellystone Park into a wasteland of garbage and filth. Her design featured messy, disheveled elements that symbolized trash accumulation, creating a visual representation of disorder that felt almost invasive. What made Lotta Litter weirdly terrifying wasn't her appearance alone, it was her methodology. She disguised herself to manipulate beloved characters like Yogi and Boo Boo, betraying their trust and leading them down a path of environmental destruction. The episode showed trash piles growing uncontrollably, evoking fears of irreversible damage in young viewers' minds. This messy chaos visualization mirrored broader 1970s eco-cartoons like The Lorax, where pollution was personified to scare kids into environmental consciousness. She reappeared in Balloon Kids, extending her litter-spreading schemes, proving that her threat wasn't just a one-time occurrence, but a recurring nightmare. Her shape-shifting ability added unpredictability, undermining the safety of familiar settings and making children question whether anything was truly as it seemed. Mr. Cheater. On October 20th, 1973, Yogi's gang introduced another villain who would tap into something profoundly unsettling, Mr. Cheater, whose full name was Peter D. Cheater, a swindler whose very existence challenged the foundation of trust. This tall, stout figure with fair skin, a bulbous nose, green unibrow-like hair, and distinctive red-lensed glasses presented himself as a friend to the gang. He wore a red jacket, with dark lapels, pink undershirt, black bow tie, gray pants, and black and white shoes, a costume that evoked the image of a shady con artist or dishonest businessman. His entire aesthetic screamed deception, but the truly terrifying aspect of Mr. Cheater wasn't his appearance, it was his manipulation of the gang's gullibility. He invited Snagglepuss and others aboard their flying ark, attempting to capture it for his global cheating schemes. This subtle betrayal eroded trust within the group, creating an insidious atmosphere where friendship itself became questionable. In a show promoting unity and honesty, his charm disguising malice mirrored real-world scams and tapped into post-Watergate paranoia about dishonesty and corruption. Fan critiques highlight how the episode portrayed the gang as gullible imbeciles, amplifying the unease of vulnerability. This wasn't just about a villain trying to win, it was about how easily good people could be deceived, making betrayal feel like a psychological threat that could happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Dread Baron. When Laugh Olympics premiered in 1977, it introduced audiences to a villain who blended humor with something far more sinister. Dread Baron, voiced by John Stevenson, who co-led the villainous Really Rottens team across all 24 episodes of the series. Created as a Dick Dastardly substitute due to potential rights issues with Hedder Quigley Productions, Dread Baron wore a Webby-Wat German flying ace uniform with a thin, curled mustache, embodying melodramatic villainy in a way that felt both comical and genuinely unsettling. He was later revealed as Dick Dastardly's brother in Marvel Comics Sector 13, adding layers to his backstory. Paired with Mumbly, a Muttley analog, Dread Baron's schemes involved elaborate traps, aerial sabotage, and relentless cheating in Olympic-style competitions set in locations ranging from the Swiss Alps to the moon. What made him weirdly terrifying was the dissonance he created, sabotage and vicious competition in what should have been fun, lighthearted settings. He was disgusted by fair wins and thrived on making victories feel precarious. His weird terror arose from blending humor with malice, creating a villain whose melodrama couldn't quite mask his underlying menace. Fans noted his boo-hiss characteristics and how his creepy uniform evoked historical villains, making him a figure that occupied an uncomfortable space between cartoon comedy and genuine threat. Queen Neimon. Queen Neimon, the tyrannical ruler of the City of Gold, renamed Xandor in the animated adaptation, represented a different kind of terror when she appeared in Filmation's Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle. Adapted from Edgar Rice Burroughs' 1931 novel Tarzan and the City of Gold, she embodied a chilling mixture of beauty, madness, and ruthless ambition. Appearing in 3 episodes across the series' run, Queen Neimon was depicted as a tall, elegant woman with long dark hair, pale skin, and sharp features that conveyed haughtiness and menace. She wore a flowing purple gown with red accents accents, a tiara, and jewelry evoking ancient Egyptian or Roman influences, reinforcing her archaic tyranny. What made Queen Neimon genuinely unsettling was her orchestration of gladiatorial fights reminiscent of ancient spectacles, introducing themes of mortality and control into Saturday morning programming. In Tarzan and the City of Gold, September 11, 1976, she imprisoned Tarzan and Phobeg, forcing them into arena battles. Her calm oversight of these violent spectacles added psychological terror, treating lives as entertainment, often accompanied by her fierce pet lion Belthar. She exuded authority that felt simultaneously regal and dangerous. Voiced by Joan Gerber in her first 2 appearances and Hedy Lynn Hertz in her 3rd, her commanding and seductive tone shifted to something more mystical, adding variety to her menace. In Tarzan and the Soul Stealer, October 13, 1979, she delved into sorcery, transforming Phobeg into a lion, amplifying dread through supernatural violations of natural order. Bergkats. Science ninja team Gatchaman introduced Western audiences, through various adaptations, to Bergkats, a villain whose complexity and unsettling nature went far beyond typical cartoon antagonists. As the second in command of the terrorist organization Galactor under the alien entity Leader X, Katse represented something genuinely disturbing: identity itself as a weapon. Born as a fusion of fraternal twins approximately 30 years before the series, Katse was a genetically engineered mutant capable of gender shifting, involuntarily at first during childhood, then mastering the ability as an adult. This instability led to family breakdown. At age 5, the first shift from female to male prompted the parents' divorce, with the father abandoning them due to societal stigma. Visually, Katse's default masculine form featured a purple bodysuit, with matching mask-bearing bat-like ears, a long purple cape with red lining, red gloves, and boots, creating an image that was both theatrical and genuinely menacing. The mask concealed an androgynous face with large lips, long dark blonde hair, and grayish-blue eyes, revealed in episode 102. What made Bergkats weirdly terrifying was the fluid identity that created an uncanny valley effect, making alliances feel unreliable and identities questionable. This gender-shifting ability enabled masterful disguises and infiltration, fooling even advanced technology. Paired with volatile mood swings and merciless tactics, Katse became a symbol of psychological horror, someone whose very existence challenged fundamental assumptions about identity and stability. Ming the Merciless. In 1979, Filmation's The New Adventures of Flash Gordon introduced a new generation to Ming the Merciless, and what they encountered was a villain who tapped into primal fears of otherness and tyranny. Voiced by Alan Oppenheimer and Vic Perrin in the pilot, Ming was depicted as a brilliant scientist and ruthless warlord ruling the planet Mongo with a vast robot army, drone rockets, armored trains, and enforcers like lizard women and beast men. His appearance featured green skin, pointed ears, a pointed beard, and flamboyant robes, emphasizing his alien otherness in a way that made him feel fundamentally different and threatening. His theatrical flair, barking orders, and manipulating conflicts between Mongo's races created an oddly hypnotic dread that blended camp sensibility with genuine menace. What made Ming weirdly terrifying was his sociopathic megalomania combined with sadistic playfulness, often toying with victims before destruction. His terror lay in his ability to instill division, mirroring real-world fears of tyranny. However, Ming's legacy is complicated. His design has long been criticized for yellow peril stereotypes, drawing from Fu Manchu archetypes. The BBC reported in 2020 that the British Board of Film Classification added warnings to the 1980 film for discriminatory stereotypes, with experts like Dr. Sadia Habib calling it a horrible stereotype of East Asian villainy. The Legion of Doom. When Challenge of the Super Friends premiered in 1978, it introduced something unprecedented: 13 supervillains assembled by Lex Luthor to counter the expanded Justice League, operating from a mobile Hall of Doom in Slaughter Swamp that could fly, submerge, tunnel, and travel through time and space. This collection of antagonists created a new kind of terror through chaotic unpredictability. The roster included Lex Luthor, Brainiac, Bizarro, Black Manta, Captain Cold, Cheetah, Giganta, Gorilla Grodd, Riddler, Scarecrow, Sinestro, Solomon Grundy, and Toyman, each bringing unique powers and psychological profiles. What made the Legion weirdly terrifying wasn't individual members, but their collective unpredictability. They used gadgets like the Dream Machine for mind control, the mutation device for transforming heroes into Bizarros, and the interspatial time conveyor for time travel. Their schemes swung wildly from apocalyptic world destruction to petty pranks, creating a tonal inconsistency that made them feel genuinely unstable. This mix of serious threats and absurd antics evoked unpredictable chaos, amplified by petty infighting among members. Their swampy Vader helmet-inspired base added eerie isolation to an already unsettling group dynamic. Dr. Bigot. On September 8, 1973, Yogi's Gang premiered with Dr. Bigot, perhaps the most unsettling villain in the show's entire run. not because of supernatural powers or physical threat, but because of what he represented. Voiced by Henry Corden, Dr. Bigot embodied prejudice itself, using a bigot ray, also called the Mindbender, to induce discrimination. His appearance featured a sneering, cape-wearing figure with a large nose and slick hair, but his true horror lay in his methodology. In the episode, he zapped Mr. Cheerful and Yogi Bear, turning them xenophobic. Yogi began ranting against animals, demonstrating how quickly prejudice could corrupt even the most beloved characters. What made Dr. Bigot weirdly terrifying was the blunt way prejudice was portrayed as an invasive force warping friends and loved ones. The idea of a ray that could turn someone you trusted into someone hateful tapped into fears of division and loss. His chemical ray blended hatred and prejudice to bigotize victims psychologically, making intolerance feel omnipresent and inescapable, like an infection that could strike anyone at any moment. Greedy Genie. In The Greedy Genie, the second episode of Yogi's Gang, directed by Charles A. Nichols, audiences encountered a villain who subverted one of childhood's most beloved fantasy figures. Voiced by John Stevenson, the Greedy Genie appeared as a rotund, green-skinned spirit with a turban, striped pants, and pointed shoes, exuding manipulative charm from the moment Yogi's gang rubbed his lamp. But this was no benevolent wish-granter from Aladdin. His powers included granting wishes with a corrupting twist, amplifying desires into excessive greed. A simple request for food became an overwhelming horde that damaged the Ark. His personality was defined by his insatiable mantra, more, which he chanted while encouraging overindulgence. What made the Greedy Genie weirdly terrifying was the psychological horror of twisted wishes, everyday desires becoming nightmarish excesses. For children watching, this subverted the comforting genie archetype, turning magic from something wonderful into something dangerous and corrupting. It evoked fears of loss of control and the dark side of consumerism, making materialism itself feel like a trap that could consume you from within. Napoleon Blown Apart. Through extensive 1970s reruns, Batfink introduced audiences to Napoleon Blown Apart in episode 73, a villain whose obsessive destructiveness hinted at something deeply unstable beneath the comedy. This diminutive figure in a mock Napoleonic uniform, complete with tricorn hat, blue coat, and boots, wielded grenades with alarming fixation. He obsessively destroyed statues with explosives, and when questioned about his motivation, he stated cryptically, "That's what my doctor wants to know," a line that implied psychological instability and mental treatment. His tactics involved tying victims to statues before detonating them, blending slapstick humor with genuine peril in a way that felt uncomfortable. What made Napoleon Blown Apart weirdly terrifying was his unpredictability stemming from apparent incompetence. His fixation on explosives wasn't strategic, it seemed compulsive, making him more hazardous precisely because his actions lacked rational motivation. This evoked fears of real-world instability packaged in a kid-friendly cartoon wrapper, creating cognitive dissonance that lingered long after the 5-minute episode ended. Paper Doll Man. The Impossibles, which aired in 1966 with extensive 1970s reruns, featured the Paper Doll Man in 2 episodes, The Perilous Paper Doll and The Return of the Perilous Paper Man. Voiced by Paul Frees, famous for Boris Badenov, this villain tapped into something primal, body horror through unnatural transformation. Appearing as a lanky, paper-thin figure with angular features and a yellow-white body, the Paper Doll Man possessed the ability to flatten himself to slip under doors or through cracks. He could contort into origami shapes like airplanes for escape, and wielded a sonic staple gun to fire staples or animate office supplies. What made Paper Doll Man weirdly terrifying was the body horror aspect, unnatural flattening that evoked primal distortion fears. Even diluted by comedy and puns, his transformation subverted the human form in ways that felt fundamentally wrong. In his first episode, he stole Plan X from the Pentagon by flattening under doors, and was ultimately defeated by being mailed to prison in his second appearance, caught in a newspaper press. These conclusions, while humorous, couldn't quite erase the disturbing visual of a human body transformed into paper-thin sheets. Brother Goose. Brother Goose appeared in Batfink episodes Brother Goose and Crimes and Rhymes, committing crimes that corrupted something sacred to childhood. Nursery Rhymes. This plump, yellow-skinned figure in a brown trench coat and hat turned innocent bedtime stories into criminal blueprints. He committed jewelry heists themed around nursery rhymes, leaving taunting clues such as using "Mary had a little lamb" to distract or "Jack be nimble" for agile escapes. His crimes involved rhyme-based distractions and gadgets tied to tales, like explosive eggs or web-like threads from Little Miss Muffet. What made Brother Goose weirdly terrifying was how he corrupted childhood familiarity. Turning bedtime stories into crime blueprints created an eerie betrayal. The punny layer couldn't quite mask the subconscious dread of innocence twisted into something sinister. When the stories your parents read you to help you sleep became tools for villainy, it created a dissonance that made the safe feel suddenly dangerous. Batfink, Episode 89, Goldie Unlocks and the Three Bears, audiences encountered a fairy tale turned on its head. Gold Unlocks appeared as a blonde woman in a dress, her innocent facade masking an obsession with locks and lockpicking. She robbed a bank with her henchmen, the Three Bears, Philip Phil, Billiam Bill, and Sylvester Sill, creating a criminal enterprise that parodied the beloved children's story. Her powers focused on lockpicking mastery and commanding her bear associates, blending the cuteness of fairy tale references with the menace of actual heists. What made Golden Locks weirdly terrifying was how she subverted beloved tales. Innocence. Becoming sinister evoked unease in familiar narratives gone wrong. She was ultimately defeated by imprisonment in a cell without locks, an ironic justice given her fixation. But the damage was done. The fairy tale had been corrupted, and Goldilocks would never quite feel the same again. Professor Stretch. Professor Stretch, voiced by Paul Frees, appeared in the Impossibles episodes The Wretched Professor Stretch, October 22, 1966, and Professor Stretch Bounces Back, December 10, 1966. This green-skinned, pointy-eared madman in a cloak possessed super elasticity that allowed for disturbing bodily transformations. His powers included limb elongation, squeezing through impossibly small spaces, and forming his body into shapes like balls. He could turn objects rubbery via powder or create monsters from chowder, expanding his threat beyond personal transformation to environmental manipulation. In The Wretched Professor Stretch, he escaped prison and sabotaged a tank with rubber powder, causing havoc before being defeated by the Impossibles, bouncing him like a basketball. What made Professor Stretch weirdly terrifying was the body horror element, unnatural elongations that tapped into distortion fears. Even though comedy diluted the threat with puns and slapstick, the fundamental wrongness of a human body stretching and contorting in impossible ways left an impression that was difficult to shake. Hugo Aogo. Hugo Aogo, voiced by Frank Buxton with a mock German accent, appeared in over 30 episodes of Batfink, more than any other villain in the series. This blue-smocked, wild-haired mad scientist operated from a secret lab, frequently breaking the fourth wall to banter with the narrator. His manic, egocentric personality was exemplified by a signature reused clip of him declaring schemes right into Mine Trap, accompanied by cackling laughter. His inventions were absurdly elaborate yet prone to failure. Brainwashing fluid squirted from a flower, a tickling stick, a laser monocle, a mechanical baby throwing grenades, an ego spray turning Batfink narcissistic, a time stopper for robberies, and a teleportation belt. What made Hugo Aogo weirdly terrifying was his blend of campy failure and relentless menace. Inventions that distorted reality evoked subconscious fears of science gone awry. In the devilish device, he could turn people into animals, fundamentally altering their nature. This wasn't just about defeating a hero, it was about reshaping reality itself in unstable and unpredictable ways, making Hugo simultaneously laughable and genuinely unsettling. Sandman Sam. In Batfink Episode 61, Sandman Sam appeared as a one-off villain who corrupted another comforting childhood figure. This criminal leveraged a folklore-inspired gimmick, slumber sand, that induced instant sleep, allowing him to rob stores while victims lay unconscious and helpless. His power even disrupted Batfink's beep radar, turning it to zzzz, forcing the hero to rely on wits rather than technology. In the episode, Sam committed citywide robberies with his sand, creating vulnerability by stripping awareness, ultimately resolved when Batfink and karate outmaneuvered him. What made Sandman Sam weirdly terrifying was how he subverted the gentle Sandman myth into an invasive predator. The Sandman was supposed to bring peaceful dreams. Instead, Sam's version brought forced helplessness and victimization. It evoked fears of vulnerability and the idea of being attacked while completely defenseless, transforming sleep from a refuge into a liability. Stupid Man. Featured in Batfink Episode 28, Stupid Man was a dim-witted Superman spoof who demonstrated how incompetence could become its own form of terror. This incredibly dumb figure in a crude superhero costume stole items like a $2 million scimitar, or the Maharaja's jewel-studded turban, using tools like a wooden club, foolish choices that somehow succeeded. The twist was his relation as the police chief's brother-in-law, rendering law enforcement powerless and forcing Batfink to intervene. His power wasn't strength or strategy, but unintentional luck from clumsiness, making his next move completely unpredictable. What made Stupid Man weirdly terrifying was how incompetence bred hazardous randomness, satirizing superhero invulnerability. When someone so incompetent kept succeeding through pure accident, it created an unsettling world where logic didn't apply, and danger could come from the most unexpected, idiotic sources. His defeats came via Batfink's cleverness, but the fundamental unpredictability made him more unsettling than many smarter villains. Bonita Bazaar. Bonita Bazaar, portrayed by comedian Martha Ray in all 17 episodes of The Bugaloos, represented jealousy taken to psychedelic extremes. This ancient, irascible witch lived in a gigantic jukebox, broadcasting obnoxious music while seething over the Bugaloos' melodic success. Her feathered outfits emphasized her flightless envy of the Bugaloos' wings, and her schemes ranged from stealing Joy's voice in The Great Voice Robbery to attempting to amputate IQ's wings in If I Had the Wings of a Bugaloo. She pumped smog into the forest in On a Clear Day and evicted the Bugaloos in The Good Old Days. Her gadgets, like the stereo zapper that rendered victims unconscious, added genuine menace to her comedy. What made Bonita Bazaar weirdly terrifying was her obsessive pursuit, blending campy humor with threats of real harm, like wing amputation or enslavement. For children, these threats perverting music and fame into chaos felt invasive and genuinely unsettling, especially when delivered through Martha Ray's talentless loudmouth performance. The Creeper. When Jeepers, It's the Creeper aired on September 26, 1970, it introduced what many consider one of Scooby-Doo's scariest villains. The Creeper appeared as a green-skinned zombie with a hunchback, dark red hair, yellow sclera, and a lopsided face, wearing a dark green trench coat resembling Frankenstein's monster or Rondo Hatton's Creeper from House of Horrors. The plot involved Mystery Inc. finding an injured bank guard who gave them a blank paper before passing out. At a barn dance, the Creeper disrupted events, demanding paper while chasing the gang through rural settings. Eventually revealed as Mr. Carswell, the bank president robbing his own bank, the Creeper's disguise was designed to silence witnesses. What made the Creeper weirdly terrifying was its relentless pursuit. Physical violence and horror tropes like emerging from darkness, then amplified by rural isolation. It demonstrated immense strength, felling trees and attacking guards, making it feel genuinely dangerous. This villain inspired the 1971 computer virus called Creeper and continues inspiring fan art and media references, cementing its status as an icon of cartoon horror. Dr. Lo Hasatodo. Jabberjaw premiered on September 11, 1976 with Dr. Lo Has Got to Go, introducing an evil underwater mastermind threatening cities with his inventions. Set in a futuristic underwater world, the show featured Jabberjaw, a talking shark voiced by Frank Welker, drumming in the band The Neptunes. Dr. Lo developed a growth ray to enlarge sea creatures and mechanical monsters for conquest, endangering underwater civilizations. The Neptunes thwarted his plans involving high-speed chases and battles with enlarged threats, but the damage to young psyches may have already been done. What made Dr. Lo Hasatodo weirdly terrifying was his hubris in tampering with nature, evoking fears of uncontrollable science in an oceanic setting. Coming in the wake of Jaws, this underwater threat tapped into pre-existing aquatic anxieties. His eccentric volatility added comic yet unsettling unpredictability, making him a one-episode villain who nonetheless left an impression of underwater chaos and scientific madness run amok. Zoltar. Battle of the Planets, which aired from 1978 to 1980, adapted science ninja team Gatchaman for Western audiences and introduced Zoltar, voiced by Key Luke. This masked, caped figure in dark armor commanded Spectra's forces under the Luminous One, a ghostly head. Adapted from Bergkats, Zoltar's cultish obedience to the spectral Luminous One created otherworldly dread. His schemes involved planting bombs and attacking cities, often foiled by G-Force, but his enigmatic nature persisted. What made Zoltar weirdly terrifying was his cultish devotion, creating an atmosphere of alien control and mysterious cosmic hierarchy. However, controversies center on how the adaptation sanitized Bergkats' intersex mutation, splitting female forms into separate characters like Mala to avoid gender themes, causing plot inconsistencies and arguably representing cultural misrepresentation of the original's complexity. Commodore Phineas P. Fibber. When Yogi's Gang aired its fourth episode on October 6, 1973, children encountered a villain who embodied something particularly insidious, the corruption of truth itself. Commodore Phineas P. Fibber represented deception in its purest form, a character whose very existence was built upon layers of falsehood that made reality itself feel unstable and unreliable. This villain appeared as a naval officer-styled figure, complete with Commodore's uniform that suggested authority and respectability, the perfect disguise for someone whose every word dripped with dishonesty. His schemes involved weaving elaborate webs of lies that ensnared the honest members of Yogi's crew, exploiting their trusting nature to create chaos through misinformation. What made Commodore Fibber weirdly terrifying was the philosophical horror he represented. In a world where lies were indistinguishable from truth, how could anyone trust their own perceptions? For children watching, this created an unsettling cognitive dissonance. If a respectable-looking authority figure could be completely dishonest, then who could be trusted? His vice of constant lying reflected the post-Watergate era's growing skepticism toward authority figures, making him not not just a cartoon villain, but a symbol of institutional betrayal. The episode's resolution, where truth ultimately prevailed through the gang's persistence and moral clarity, offered reassurance. But the damage was done. Commodore Fibber had planted seeds of doubt about the nature of truth itself, making him a villain whose impact extended far beyond his single-episode appearance. Gossipy Witch of the West. In the 5th episode of Yogi's Gang, aired on October 13, 1973, audiences encountered the Gossipy Witch of the West, a villain who weaponized something seemingly innocuous, rumors and whispers. This witch, clearly inspired by the Wizard of Oz's Wicked Witch, but twisted into a moral allegory about gossip, demonstrated how words alone could destroy communities and relationships. Her appearance likely featured stereotypical witch elements, pointed hat, broomstick, and cackling demeanor, but her true power lay not in magic spells, but in her ability to spread rumors that turned friends against each other. She personified how gossip could poison trust and create divisions within even the closest groups, making her weapon of choice psychological rather than supernatural. What made the Gossipy Witch weirdly terrifying was how she demonstrated that words could inflict damage as real as any physical weapon. For children experiencing their first encounters with playground rumors and social manipulation, this villain represented a threat that felt uncomfortably familiar. She showed how easily misinformation could spread and how difficult it was to counter once released into the world. The episode's message about the dangers of gossip and the importance of direct communication was delivered with the show's characteristic heavy-handedness, but the Gossipy Witch herself left an impression that lingered, a reminder that sometimes the scariest villains don't need supernatural powers when they can simply manipulate the social fabric that holds communities together. Mr. Waste. As Yogi's Gang continued its moralistic crusade through the 1973 season, Mr. Waste emerged as another environmental villain, but one whose threat operated differently from Lotta Litter's chaotic messmaking. Mr. Waste embodied wastefulness and the careless squandering of precious resources, making him a villain whose villainy lay in thoughtless consumption rather than active pollution. This antagonist's design and schemes focused on encouraging overconsumption and the disposal of perfectly good items, promoting a throwaway culture that mirrored growing 1970s concerns about resource depletion and consumer excess. Unlike villains with grandiose plans for world domination, Mr. Waste's threat was more insidious. He made waste seem normal, acceptable, even desirable. What made Mr. Waste weirdly terrifying was how he represented the banality of environmental destruction. He wasn't a cackling madman or a power-hungry tyrant. He was simply someone who didn't think about consequences, making him perhaps the most realistic villain in the entire Yogi's Gang roster. For children watching in an era of increasing environmental awareness following the 1970 Earth Day movement, Mr. Waste served as an uncomfortable mirror reflecting behaviors they might recognize in their own families and communities. His pollution schemes and promotion of wastefulness created an atmosphere of normalized destruction, suggesting that the greatest environmental threats might not come from supervillains, but from ordinary people making thoughtless choices every single day. This mundane horror, the idea that we could all become Mr. Waste through simple carelessness, made him uniquely unsettling in ways more fantastical villains could never achieve. Mr. Hothead. Yogi's Gang concluded its 15-episode run on December 29, 1973, with Mr. Hothead, a villain who personified uncontrolled anger and violent temper. As the final Vice-themed antagonist in the series, Mr. Hothead represented something children encountered far too frequently in real life: adults who couldn't control their rage. This villain's entire persona centered on explosive anger and temper flares that escalated situations from minor annoyances to genuine crises. His likely red-faced, steam-emitting design would have visually communicated his constantly simmering fury, making him a walking powder keg whose next explosion was always just moments away. What made Mr. Hothead weirdly terrifying was how his anger made every situation unpredictable and dangerous. Unlike villains with calculated plans, Mr. Hothead's rage was reactive and disproportionate, creating an atmosphere where anything could trigger a violent outburst. For children who had experienced angry adults, whether teachers, parents, or other authority figures, Mr. Hothead represented a genuine source of anxiety wrapped in cartoon packaging. His schemes, driven by uncontrolled fury rather than rational planning, demonstrated how anger itself could become a destructive force that harmed not just its targets, but the angry person themselves. The episode's message about the importance of emotional regulation and the consequences of unchecked anger was particularly relevant in an era when corporal punishment was still common and anger management was rarely discussed. Mr. Hothead served as a fitting conclusion to Yogi's Gang's Rogues Gallery, a reminder that sometimes the most frightening monsters aren't supernatural beings or mad scientists, but simply people who've lost control of their own emotions. His temper-driven chaos left young viewers with an uncomfortable recognition. They had probably encountered real-life Mr. Hotheads, making him perhaps the most genuinely terrifying villain in the entire series, precisely because he was the most realistic. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.